So this is more on the issue of the mistranslation of Einstein, and I will be dealing with the light speed, and it's not constant. It's further to the talk entitled Einstein Mistranslated about Einstein's 1905 paper on special relativity being mistranslated. Einstein in 1905 should not be interpreted as saying that light speed in vacuum is constant, at least not in the general case. So this book points out that Einstein's 1905 paper on special relativity is mistranslated, and the book was published in 1981, but does not seem to have made much impression on the physics establishment that keeps citing the mistranslated version. This is what Arthur Miller says. Let's look at it closer. It says, this appendix contains my translation of Einstein's 1905 special relativity paper as published in the Annals to Physics. It should be noted that it differs from previous and in places quite unacceptable English language translations. So he's making it clear that there are a lot of mistranslated copies of Einstein's 1905 paper, and he's providing what he considers to be a better version. I'll leave you a few minutes, you can read the rest of it if you want to. So on to the next part. He continues, and you can read this if you want to. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what he's talking about. There are several papers written on relativity, and you could take it as starting from the events in 1895. So it's too much to go through all the mistranslation issues, and I'm just going to concentrate on part of the problem. So one translation problem was pointed out in an article that was published in 1963 and which was published online in 2005. It was published in the American Journal of Physics, and the article is entitled Mistranslation of a Passage in Einstein's Original Paper on Relativity. So let's go to that then. So this is what the article says. Students of the special theory of relativity who have read Einstein's fundamental paper, and it says it in German, what the title is, only in the English translation by W. Perrett and G.B. Jeffrey may appreciate our pointing out the following passage in which an unnecessary elaboration of the text on the part of the translators has somewhat altered its exact meaning. We quote below the original passage and then the translation, placing brackets around the questionable part of the latter. So you can read that if you like, I'll leave you a few minutes, but basically what is in German has not been properly translated into English, and so it's giving a false impression of what theory of special relativity is about. There we go, so for the next part of it. So here it is, and in the square brackets is the problem part. So I'll highlight it. That is the problem part of the translation. So if we read it, but it is not possible without further assumption to compare in respect of time an event at capital A with an event at capital B. We have so far defined only capital A time and a capital B time. We have not defined a common time for capital A and capital B. And this part highlighted now is where the mistranslation has happened. Saying for the latter cannot be defined at all unless we establish by definition. And the better translation is that is highlighted in what I'm highlighting now. So this it's saying the latter time can now be defined and established by definition at the time, etc. So this is where the mistranslation has occurred. I'll give you some time so you can read through it. Hopefully you're a fast reader and you've read all that. So we go on to the next bit. So he carries on. I'll give you some time to read this as well if you want to. Okay, so hopefully you're fast and read that. Next. Now, published in the American Journal of Physics in 1963, there was a comment. And the comment on the mistranslation of the passage in Einstein's original paper on relativity. And we can go to that. This is the comment. Read it. In your May issue of May 1963, you published a letter under the above heading from Charles. It may be of interest to remark that the hour to which the attention has now been called was probably due not to an unnecessary elaboration of the text on the part of the translators, but to their misreading the word none. This is the German word nun, which means in English now. And if you read on the rest of it, so they probably mistranslated that word. They got the German word none, N-U-N, confused with the German word N-U-R. That's where mistranslation now could be. Right, so what I'm highlighting here is the incorrect translation compared to the correct translation. And the problem is in what is highlighted here. In the highlight for the letter time cannot be defined at all unless we establish by definition at the time. So and so on. And that's the highlighted area is where the mistranslation is. The incorrect translation makes it that time cannot be defined any other way, while the correct translation is allowing time to be defined in other ways. And if we look at the Arthur Miller translation, he has it correctly. He's allowing time to be defined in other ways as well, and not insisting time can only be defined in one way. And this is an issue I'll come back to in a little while. Now I've got to go on to the issue of light speed constancy. So let's look at what is said about light speed constancy in vacuum for inertial frames. Now I'm adding the provisos that light speed is being dealt with in vacuum and in inertial frames. Sometimes texts on relativity are careless and omit saying that, and they'll just say light speed is constant, and they're not giving you the provisos that you're talking about light speed in vacuum and dealing with inertial frames. And also it should be said that it's light free of the influences of such things as gravity as well. So this is what Wikipedia says, and it gives the two postulates of Albert Einstein, and the first postulate is that one: the laws of physics are invariant, blah 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 blah, and it's talking about inertial frames. And the second postulate is this one, and it's saying the second postulate: the speed of light in vacuum is the same for all observers regardless of the motion of the light source or observer. So next, I'm highlighting what Wikipedia is saying again on the speed of light, and Wikipedia is not completely reliable, so let's look at another source, Einstein Online. So this is Einstein Online, and it says about constancy of light speed. One of the basic postulates of special relativity, the speed of light in a vacuum is the same for all observers drifting through gravity-free space, more precisely for all inertial observers. In particular, its value is independent of an observer's motion relative to the source of the light. So Einstein Online is a bit more precise than Wikipedia, but carry on. Both are short accounts for what light speed constancy is. So let's look at what Einstein says about it in 1905. This is the Arthur Miller translation of Einstein's paper, and it says any ray of light moves in the resting coordinates system with a definite velocity c, and it's probably would have been better to say speed than velocity, but anyway, which is independent of whether the ray was emitted by a resting or by a moving body. Consequently, velocity equals light path divided by time interval. And once again, it probably better to say speed, but anyway, it goes on to explain where time interval is to be understood in the sense of the definition in section 1. So it's a quite a lot longer description of what light speed constancy is compared to the other two that we've just quoted, and is talking about time as being defined as per section 1, and that's been missed out by the other two accounts. In physics text on relativity, they too usually give the short description. They usually just say light speed constant, assuming light speed constant, and they sometimes say in inertial frames and all the other extra bits on, like in vacuum and so forth. They sometimes add that, they sometimes don't, but they miss out saying time has to be defined in a certain way. So this is from section 1 from what Einstein writes, and he's pointing out how to deal with time. And this is where I pointed out the translation problem earlier. And it's, if we pick the relevant bit there highlighted, the latter time can now be defined by requiring that by definition the time necessary for light to travel from A to B be identical to the time necessary to travel from B to A. And that's the part where I've highlighted is where the translation problem was earlier, and the mistranslation says you've got to have time defined that way. In this one, it's not making that claim, it's saying you could define time that way. So pointing out the problem was again the mistranslation issue. The incorrect translation makes it that time cannot be defined by any other way than what he says in section 1, versus the correct translation where he's allowing time to be defined in other ways. So this is what Einstein's saying again, highlighting it again. So when Einstein says this, what Einstein is saying, if define time the way given in this section 1, and then light speed is constant. If don't define time that way, then light speed is not constant. Now, Einstein could have made that clearer, but he didn't. And so we're just faced with what he's given us. He's telling us define time in the way of section 1, and you've got light speed as constant. But he's not insisting that you define time that way. And hence, not insisting you define time that way, light is then not being insisted upon as being constant. The section 1 definition of time is nowadays called Einstein's clock synchronization. If don't define time that way, then light speed in vacuum for inertial frames, free of influences of gravity and so forth, is not constant. And so some people do of course argue that can only define time as per Einstein's synchronization, but Einstein is only saying that in the incorrect translation. In the correct translation, he is not insisting time be defined that way. In the mistranslation issue of the incorrect translation makes it that time cannot be defined any other way, versus the correct translation allowing time to be defined in other ways. I.e., the correct translation of time, Einstein allows time to be dealt with in different ways, and when you look at the maths allows itself to be written differently, so time is not defined as per Einstein's synchronization. The maths is flexible, it allows you to define time in other ways than by Einstein's synchronization. So the maths can be written so that light speed is not constant, and the correct translation of Einstein allows it. So Einstein's special relativity has been misrepresented via its mistranslation. Einstein does not have light speed as constant in general. So, leading on to the conclusion from about everything I've been saying, Einstein does not have light speed as constant, at least not in his 1905 paper. And by that I mean light speed in vacuum and in inertial frames, free of the influences of such things as gravity. It has been a mistranslation of Einstein to present Einstein's special relativity as having light speed as constant in general. i.e. it's only under special circumstances is light speed constant. In general it isn't. But he did not really make it clear in 1905 that that's what he was talking about. He's dealing with light speed as constant under a special circumstance of having Einstein synchronization. When it doesn't have Einstein synchronization, then light speed is not constant, and it's the general case that light speed is not constant. So it's the whole of modern 20th century physics has been based on misunderstanding what Einstein was saying. You're having these texts on relativities telling you that light speed is constant, and they're not specifying often that what they're talking about is light speed in vacuum and inertial frames free of the influence of such things as gravity. But making that allowance, they're not then telling you it is only constant for the special case of Einstein synchronization, and in the general case it is not constant. Light speed is not constant in the general case, it's only constant in the special case. It is not making that clear to people, and hence why is confusing everybody. Pretty much everybody has got it wrong about what Einstein is talking about, and it's not been helped by mistranslating Einstein. Thank you.